Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. In last 10 days, there were 3 attacks in Balochistan specifically. Yesterday, 14 people were killed by 10 or 15 people who pulled them out of a bus on a Makran Coastal Highway in Urmara, Balochistan, and these people were killed by the unidentified people in Balochistan. Before that, Quetta was attacked. A specific community is reported to be attacked by the terrorists, and there was also an attack on the security forces of Pakistan in Chaman. So this has been going on in Balochistan. Balochistan, this is not the first time that Balochistan has been targeted by the terrorist organizations. Balochistan has been hit repeatedly, and there are certainly several reasons for it. Balochistan's terrain, its border with Afghanistan and Iran. The security situation in Balochistan is different from other parts of Pakistan. The center has its own issues and the peripheries have their own issues. What can we do to make Balochistan and Quetta specifically and other parts of Balochistan more secure? And what can we do to make the life of the people of Balochistan and Quetta more secure? If we have embarked on a mega economic activity, which is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, we also have to make sure that our people are safe whenever they travel or wherever they travel. And we have to, our security agencies, our local administration, they have to ensure the security of the people. Pakistan has fought this extremism and terrorism successfully. Last couple of years we have seen have been very stable. Pakistan has defeated the organized presence which was there once of TTP and Daesh for that matter. Daesh was operating inside Balochistan, but they were defeated and their cells were also eliminated by the Pakistani armed forces, by the local administration, police and intelligence agencies. But this is a new challenge again that has erupted. What can we do about these sporadic attacks? But last 10 days there were these consistently, the people of Balochistan were attacked by the terrorist organizations. We are going to discuss about the security situation in Balochistan, and also we are going to discuss about Afghanistan. Taliban again have called off the peace talks which were scheduled with the American administration and also with the different factions of Afghan society. Taliban have said that they weren't expecting a large group that would be representing the Afghan government. So there was some sort of a misunderstanding perhaps between the Afghan government, the Qatar, the organization in Qatar and the Taliban. Was it so? We are going to discuss about this as well, because Taliban know this very well that the tenure of the Kabul government is going to end next month, and they are not left with much time. And what would be now the future of Afghan peace talks, since the Taliban have called off the peace talks which were scheduled to take place with the Afghan government? We're going to discuss about this with our special guest in the studios. Our first guest is Lieutenant General Talat Masood, renowned senior defense analyst and expert on Pakistan's security. So welcome to the show. Second guest is Dr. Khurram Iqbal. He is a renowned senior analyst on counter-terrorism and also on the situation of Balochistan and Afghanistan. So welcome to the show. General Masood, starting with this attack on the Makran Coastal Highway. This happened before as well in 2015. People were pulled out of the bus and they were targeted, they were killed by the terrorists. This has happened again yesterday. What is the nature of this sort of terrorism, and are people, whenever they are traveling, though they were traveling around 12 in the morning, 1 in the morning, and certainly that was a difficult time to travel as well, and Makran Coastal Highway is a difficult terrain for that matter. How do you see this specific incident and the last 2 incidents?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate, as you have very rightly mentioned, that there has been a sort of a increase in the number of incidents that have been taking place, because Balochistan had become relatively also more peaceful, but again there is a surge of it. And to answer your question, I think it could well be sectarian. It could well be sectarian because the way that they have been very selective. It could also be that they wanted to target the security forces. And amongst the security forces also they want to be selective as to whom they should target and whom they should leave. So what it reflects truly is that they have in a way so much of space to operate, and they think they are unchallenged, and that is why they have so much of time to pick and choose and try to target these people. And then of course the border is porous, as you have been saying, and it's not only the border is porous, but the border on both the sides, both Iran as well as the Afghan side, are so turbulent. The Afghan side is turbulent as far as the Iranian side is concerned. They also have somewhat similar problems with their various tribes and so on. And at the same time, there is a question of smuggling, there is a question of so many, trafficking and so on. So all these factors and a combination of what I said earlier, that, they were targeting perhaps the military, they were targeting the rangers, they were targeting the, Shias, passengers and so on. So all these factors are coming into play, which shows that these forces are all still dominating the border. And we have been trying to, as you rightly mentioned, that Pakistan has been successful in the past. Now I think it will have to take more severe measures in order to prevent that. And also we need to sort of cooperate both with the other countries like, Iran in particular, Afghanistan also, although Afghanistan hardly has any control over the regions from where these people are coming, but nonetheless. And at the same time, I think we can even cooperate with the Taliban on the other side in order to ensure that these type of things do not happen within our country. And then I would also say that build the confidence of the people within the province, which is extremely necessary, so that the people of Balochistan also feel that they have a huge stake and are fully in connoissance with the military and the defense and security forces of Pakistan.
Right. And Dr. Iqbal, how do you see this incident, the incident of yesterday? What is the nature of such kind of terrorism? This happened, as I mentioned earlier, in 2015, and this specifically, they identify a few people, they take them out of the bus, and then they target them, they kill them. How do you see that?
Taimur, Balochistan suffers from three parallel waves of terrorism: ethnic, sectarian, and transnational Islamist terrorist organizations. Ethnic insurgency, I would say this particular attack in Ormara was of ethnic terrorist in nature. The responsibility of the attack has been claimed by an umbrella organization which claims to be consisted of three Baloch militant organizations. This is the same organization which was involved in the attack on Chinese consulate in Karachi, and in the aftermath of the attack, the leader of this terrorist organization was killed in Afghanistan. So the leadership of these terrorist organizations continues to operate from Afghanistan, and I would second General Talat Masood that we have to either take Afghan government on board or seek cooperation from Afghan Taliban to eliminate these anti-Pakistan forces from the Afghan soil. As far as the factors of this resurgence of terrorism is concerned, I think there are two major reasons for that. First is the presence or strong presence of anti-Pakistan intelligence agencies. We must not forget that Kulbhushan Yadav used to operate entire network from Pakistan-Iran border in the Balochistan region. Certainly, a number of arrests were made on the hints provided by Kulbhushan Yadav, but still number of people attached to that network are still at large, which is manifested in such attacks. Secondly, the type of border which is very porous between Pakistan and Afghanistan and then Pakistan and Iran, that is one major reason that has led to, I would say, the resurgence of terrorism in Balochistan. As far as Pakistan's border with Afghanistan is concerned, we have successfully fenced 900 kilometers of our border with Afghanistan, which is, I would say, it's a big success because the terrain is quite tough. It is one of world's longest border that Pakistan Army has successfully fenced. But the Balochistan part of the border still remains to be fenced. So far, we have only, opted for trenching in that area, but the fencing process has already started. A few months ago, General Bajwa inaugurated the Balochistan component of Pak-Afghan border. So I believe if Pakistan successfully completes its border fencing with Afghanistan, that would certainly lead to reduction in the acts of terrorism in the province.
But as you said earlier, General Talat was saying that the Afghan government, they don't have the control over all of areas in Afghanistan, and especially on the border. Do you think that Afghanistan in this specific case of keeping a check on those terrorist organizations can cooperate with Pakistan now, since the Kabul government is going to complete its tenure next month? So how should we go about it?
Well, I think it's more than will, it's a matter of capacity. The regime in Kabul does not have the capacity to extend its control beyond Kabul. More than 50% of Afghanistan is controlled by Afghan Taliban, and if Afghan Taliban has such a major say in that country, so I think besides the Kabul regime, we should engage with those who are controlling the territory that concerns Pakistan. As far as Kabul government is concerned, Pakistan has repeatedly requested the Ghani administration to cooperate with Pakistan to eliminate the elements of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the ethno-nationalist terrorist organizations operating from Afghanistan. But thus far, we have not received such a cooperation from the Afghan side. So I think we have to think out of box, and that out of box solution may also involve either can we actually go cross-border in Afghanistan when Kabul regime refused to cooperate with Pakistan? I think that is one thing that the policymakers in Pakistan will have to deliberate upon.
And this is very interesting because the people who planned, General Masood, the attack on the Chinese consulate, their leader, as Dr. Iqbal just said, he was killed in Afghanistan. Certainly there was some the Pakistani agencies and other people were working on it to keep a check on those people. What can we do to make sure that our people, when they travel on Makran, let's say coastal highway or anywhere in Balochistan, they are safe? Times are changing, situation has been changing. We have been dealing with TTP and Daesh, but with the change of time, we also have to come up with new strategy. What should be Pakistan's new strategy of handling and tackling these sort of attacks?
One is, of course, the very conventional and also has been for ages the same, that you have conventional forces, security forces right throughout the border as much as you can afford, or as many as you have at your disposal, and spread them, especially focus them and concentrate them in those areas where you think that there is a greater likelihood. That is one step. And then, of course, there has to be, to my mind, aerial reconnaissance as well. That also helps to see that if there is any movement of people taking place. And then observation through satellites. That also is very useful.
And nowadays especially,
nowadays,
technology is
yes,
so advanced now.
And then I would say, apart from that, cooperation with the people there, so that they can identify, and then you can take a lot of measures, preventive measures, so that you don't have to wait for them to get prepared and then commit acts of violence. So you prevent that. So there are several ways of doing it. But the question then arises also that you need immense resources for all this, because the area that has to be covered is huge. There is no doubt about it. So to what extent you have resources at your disposal to be able to sort of... So I think in the ultimate analysis, I would say you will have to work with the people of that area so that they become the real bastion of protecting the area, and but it's a long-term process, and at the moment I don't think you can only rely on that. So the factors and the sort of ways of sort of going about it, I think I've already mentioned those. Yes. And I would say, for the time being at least, I don't see any other way apart from the fact that you also do a lot of patrolling and patrolling both on the ground as well as on the air, in the air.
You're absolutely right, because Dr. Khurram, this used to happen 5-6 years back, 6-7 years back, when I remember Karakoram Highway was also not very safe. Same was the case with Makran Coastal Highway, other highways in Balochistan for that matter, and patrolling, as General Masood just rightly said, that patrolling did a lot of help to make sure that our people are secure, checkposts at different areas. Do you think that we need to revise that, or is there any mechanism where we can have a better coordination among different institutions? Because we know now that when people are traveling from Pakistan to, let's say, Iran, they were targeted. We know Hazaras are being targeted off and on. Makran Coastal Highway, KKH for that matter. So things are very clear that we have to work on these areas basically. Is there any institution, a platform where we all sit and we think about these issues?
I think to deal with such problems, the Indus Highway model would become very handy, because in Sindh province a couple of decades ago, we faced similar problems, either by the bandits or the ethno-nationalist terrorist organizations, that they would come, they would raid the buses, and for the financial and terrorist purposes as well.
That was in Sindh?
That was in Sindh, along the Indus highway. Yeah. The way we dealt with it, that we had to provide security to the entire convoys of the public buses. So I think for the time being, that's the most practical solution at the moment, considering the financial constraints of the government of Pakistan. Secondly, as far as the law enforcement agencies' engagement with the community is concerned, I think that's the key. And how do you do that? For that, you need a strategic vision guiding such interventions. And since Brigadier Ejaz Shah has recently taken charge of the Interior Ministry, there are reasons to be optimist. Why? Because he has been a spy master. He has years of experience working with Pakistan Armed Forces. He has served as the head of Intelligence Bureau at a very critical juncture of Pakistan's war against terrorism. That was the time from 2003 to 2008 when Pakistan apprehended more than 1/3 leadership of Al-Qaeda. So I think with such an experience, Brigadier Ejaz Shah has a very important role to play with regards to Balochistan. And if you ask me the amount of resources that we require to pacify Balochistan, I think we'll have to do it the way the state of Pakistan has dealt with the Karachi issue. That is on the war footings. Because as you have rightly mentioned in your intro, now Balochistan is the backbone of Pakistan's economic future. And if we are unable to secure Balochistan, such strategic highways, we may not be able to impress the international investors who are willing to invest in Balochistan to basically change the fortune of the local people.
And General Masood, these sort of incidents are also very symbolic when we talk about geostrategy or geoeconomics. If we have embarked on China-Pakistan economic corridor and something like this happens, these are optics, and this is very important when we talk about our whole idea of economy. So how do you see this narrative that builds
you raised
around?
a very useful and an interesting point. The fact remains that the CPEC, not many countries are very fond of the CPEC. They are against it. They have their interests, strategic interests, which totally oppose Pakistan's partnership with China. So you could also think that they have been sort of encouraging these forces or overlooking, even if they are operating from their own territory. So that is one aspect of it, truly speaking, and that's very important. So I would also think that because it is so important, we should give greatest importance and stress on the security of that area. Right. Because the success of these projects would very much depend on how our partners and we ourselves feel secure while implementing the CPEC. So I think this is so central, security is so central for CPEC.
And development and governance, we were talking about this before the show. This is very important. Security can just address the security part. But at the very core of this whole thing is governance and development. So do you think that we need to have a strong mechanism and a plan, the government of Balochistan especially, and with the help of the federal government, that let's go to the people, let's reach out to them and talk to them about the idea of Pakistan, the idea of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor for that matter?
Actually, you raise a very, very important point. Actually, I would think that this is one area in which we have been extremely neglectful. The fact is that, truly speaking, this is the responsibility of the Balochistan government. And the Balochistan government has been inadequate as far as security is concerned, as far as political development is concerned, as far as economic development is concerned. It's not only just this government, but over a long period of time. So I think it's important to give them responsibility. It is also to sort of be sure that there is also a greater level of accountability, and there is a greater level of participation of the Baloch government and a genuine interest of the Baloch government in all these development and security matters. If development takes place, people will feel so happy and secure themselves that they would try to sort of make sure that these elements do not thrive in that environment. So the reason, one of the reasons is that there is so much of vacuum, both in terms of space, and also there is so much of distrust amongst a certain elements of the population that they perhaps either ignore or encourage these elements to sort of thrive, or still continue with their inimical activities.
Right. Dr. Iqbal, what do you think about this point specifically of connecting governance and development with security? Because if, let's say, there is a counter narrative, a narrative that is negative anywhere in Pakistan, perhaps the provincial governments and the federal government, they can address that issue, go to the people, reach out to them and tell them that the security and development will benefit all of us. Is that doable?
Certainly that is. History of counterinsurgencies in different theaters of the world suggests that counterinsurgency is always only 20% kinetic and 80% non-kinetic. And that non-kinetic parts includes good governance, economic developments, etc.
So sorry to cut you, I'll get back to you. We have Senator Kakar with us on phone call. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Senator Kakar, talking about the incident that took place yesterday. People were killed by the terrorist organization, and this has been happening repeatedly in Balochistan. How do you see this whole situation and this new wave of terrorism?
Well, I don't call it a new wave, but yes, there has been a lull for a while, I mean almost for a year. But there were some periodic attacks when it is in the context of the separatist groups, which has been coming in the past also against innocent citizens. So again, I was hearing one of your panelists probably was talking about the counterinsurgency and the percentage of it. No doubt, I agree there might be 20% of the kinetics, which is important. But if you do not apply that 20% in an appropriate manner, the rest of the 80% cannot work. The rest of the 80% has to be built on the basis of this 20%. So that is the foundation of it. Because if you do not have a manageable violence level, you cannot have the rest of the things in place. So I personally feel that that 20% has not been applied appropriately and properly in the case of Balochistan, which it's high time it needs to be done. We have done it in North Waziristan and South Waziristan and former FATA. Why can't we do it here? Such groups who have resorted to violence, they need to be completely neutralized, or if not completely neutralized, at least they should be brought to a manageable level where they cannot pose a serious threat to the peace of the generally province and its people.
Right, and Senator Kakar, what do you think is the main issue? We have seen in the past as well that KKH at one point was difficult to manage, but we have managed that. As you rightly said, Pakistan has managed to get rid of TTP and Daesh for that matter, a lot of terrorist organizations which were once operating in Waziristan for that matter. Going for a military operation perhaps is a short-term solution. For the long-term solution, governance is the key. Do you think that security combined with governance and development can address this issue of this terrorism in Balochistan specifically?
Well, I'm citing here a practical scenario. I'm citing or trying to at least cite or depict a practical scenario. Let's say the town of Awaran, where the insurgents have got a hold, or in the vicinity of the Awaran, and they do not allow a school to function, a health facility to be provided, and the rest of all the matter which is being related to the governance and the so-called buzzword. So initially you need to have that control back and deny them that opportunity where they have that influence on the events. So for that you need kinetics. If you do not apply that kinetics, the rest of the governance only remains a bookish concept.
Right, and do you think that this military operation combined with good governance and coordination can solve this issue of terrorism over there?
Please do not put words into my mouth. I'm not suggesting military operation. What I am suggesting is the paramilitary, the frontier corps, and the rest have got full capacity to handle with these groups. It's not that we require conventional military force to go against these elements. I think the paramilitary and the rest of the police force, if they are combined and they are effectively being executed, they can eliminate this threat.
And this fencing of border, how important is the issue of this porous border with Afghanistan or with Iran for that matter? How important is that?
It is the most important thing. It needs to be done on the urgent basis. Until and unless we do not do that, the flow of violent elements would keep coming on our side, and we would be eliminating certain and would be getting another supply of people. So in order to block and obstruct that supply, the border needs to be fenced, the border needs to be managed. There's no question about that, no compromise on that as far as border management is concerned.
Senator Kakar, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Iqbal, you just heard the senator, he himself from Balochistan, and I think very clear and categorical about his point and how he sees Balochistan, as you were saying earlier, this kinetic operation and governance that he was mentioning. How do you see his government?
Well, certainly both the kinetic and non-kinetic parts, they complement each other. They're not mutually exclusive. So I would agree with him that for politicians to deliver effective governance, there's a need to first militarily pacify the insurgents. But haven't we seen limited operations in Balochistan during last 15 years or so? So armed forces of Pakistan have certainly played their role in pacifying the insurgency, but the problem is that the civilian law enforcement agencies and our politicians, they have failed to consolidate the gains made by the armed forces inside Balochistan. Why? Because there is a serious issue of capacity of our law enforcement agencies, whether it's Balochistan, Punjab or Sindh. So the first thing that we need to do is to boost the capacity of the law enforcement agencies, especially on the civilian side, because failure to do so would continue to bring in such incidents. As far as the governance and development is concerned, CPAC comes as a developmental counter-narrative to the insurgency in Balochistan, because it promises to uplift the society and the economy of Balochistan by incorporating it into national mainstream. But then again, there's a question of efficient and timely and transparent implementation of China-Pakistan economic corridor. So there are a lot of factors which are intertwined. Certainly a purely security-centric approach will not do. Would have to combine both human-centric and state-centric approach to pacify insurgency and to mainstream Balochistan.
Right, and we are going to continue our discussion on Afghanistan. After this break, Taliban have called off the scheduled meeting with the different factions, political factions of Afghanistan, and they have said that they weren't expecting such a big number of delegation that would be visiting Qatar. and that delegation was to represent the Kabul government. Taliban want the peace talks, but they don't want the peace talks with the people who would be representing the Kabul government. Here's the tricky point. They think that by doing so, they would give the credibility to the Afghan government. And that is where actually the issue is, that it is a matter of credibility between the Afghan Taliban and the political factions and specifically the Ghani administration. We're going to discuss about this after this break. Stay with us.
Passion for polo will be the highest on the world's highest polo ground. Shandur invites visitors to experience a traditional polo tournament between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The tournament is held on Shandur Pass, the highest polo ground in the world, at 3,700 meters above sea level. The first time a polo tournament took place on the Shandur Pass was in 1936. It is a place unique and exotic in itself, surrounded by some of the most spectacular mountain scenery in the world. The event marks the annual rivalry between the teams of Chitral and Gilgit. The polo tournament has some added attractions for the visitors: trout fishing at the nearby streams and lakes, and a festival of folk dances and music of northern Pakistan. The event in itself offers a fascinating insight into the lifestyle of the people of this region. Their culture and indigenous customs are a delight to behold for the visitors. Crystal clear lakes, snow-covered mountains, alpine flowers, and vast stretches of green grass are added attractions. Fairs and festivals of Pakistan.
Welcome back. We are discussing Afghanistan, the security situation over there. After 17 years, US wants to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan. Some experts are of the view that perhaps the United States, the White House, is trying to impose these peace talks on the Taliban. It's also a matter of prestige for the Ghani administration as well, for the American administration, and also for the Taliban. The tenure of the Afghan government, the Kabul government, is going to end next month on the 21st of May. After that, things would get clear next month. But the talks continue in Qatar, and the scheduled talks were called off by the Taliban, who weren't expecting so many people. These were the words of the Taliban spokesperson, Zabihullah Mujahid, who said that they weren't expecting so many people from the Kabul government who would be visiting Qatar. And they called off, actually they delayed the talks, and let's see when the talks would take place. Also keeping in mind that Kabul government, as I mentioned earlier, is going to complete its tenure, what will be the future of Afghan peace talks, the security situation in Afghanistan? Would Taliban accept the proposal by the Kabul administration, by the American administration for that matter, to accept the Kabul government as a legitimate party to this whole issue? Taliban have denied that legitimacy to the Kabul government. General Masood, talking about this legitimacy, these talks, and interestingly, two tracks are going on, one in Moscow and one in Qatar. Taliban have called off this meeting in Qatar. Do you think that this would move on, or perhaps just Taliban are trying to delay the peace talks and wait for the Kabul government to complete their tenure on the 21st of May, and then perhaps they can come up with a new strategy?
Well, that could be one important factor, but apart from that, I think the more important factor is that they think that they are winning anyway, and they are winning on the battleground, in the sense they are continuing with their operations, and they have been very successful in that, and they are expanding their area of influence. The Afghan government and the Afghan military forces have been very weak and have been unable to sort of really control their territory or expand their area of influence. So that is why the Americans also decided to directly talk to them. So, and then of course it was in a way quite absurd to have 250 people negotiating with about 5 or 6 or 7 of them. So it was disproportionate, and in any case what it meant was that it was more of an assembly rather than a negotiating team. And so the nature of the whole concept of dialogue had changed. So they had valid reasons to sort of say, well, we are not going to talk. But the thing is that, as you rightly say, that whether are they serious talking to the Afghans or not, because they are trying to say that they are not the representatives. And in any case, now the elections are going to take place and we are going to have a new team and we may engage with them. But the there are 2 factors which we cannot ignore. One is that the Taliban, even though they have expanded their area of influence, they control many areas, yet they do not control the whole of Afghanistan and would never be able to do that. So they are not a very progressive force, not to talk of very, they are not a progressive force, and I don't think the US, or for that matter even Pakistan, would be very happy to totally rely that the Taliban take control over Afghanistan, because you need progressive forces to really see to it that Afghanistan becomes a real modern and a stable state. And that can only happen if there is a combination of Taliban with other, and that they allied themselves with other forces.
But interestingly, Dr. Iqbal, this time there were reports that there would be a women delegation from the Taliban side as well. And Taliban are changing and they want to give women also space in the peace talks. Do you think that what General Masood just said, not a very progressive, of course, movement, but they have learned something in last 17 years? Do you think that they would change or they would show some flexibility? Because they met women from other political Afghan factions in Moscow. So would they come up and show something different?
Taimur, I think progressive is a subjective term. It varies from context to a context. During last 18 years, Taliban, especially in Afghanistan, they have undergone a lot of ideological transformation, whether it's about female emancipation or the education or perhaps their engagement with the international community, their refusal to harbor any international terrorist organizations. So I think these are few indicators that Taliban are perhaps willing to change their position on certain issues related to modernity. As far as the issue of these talks are concerned, I think more than the number of participants in the delegation, it was the composition of delegation that was nominated by Ashraf Ghani, because according to Afghan Taliban, they saw a number of spoilers in that delegation, including Amarullah Saleh. Such elements, they have been totally opposed to any idea of engaging in talks with Afghan Taliban. They have been advocating a purely military solution to deal with Afghan Taliban, which has certainly not worked. So I think it was a timely move by Afghan Taliban to call it off or postpone it. But we should not forget that even in the recent past, some of the sessions have been called off or postponed, but talks again, they were put on the track. So I wouldn't say that these talks have been cancelled for good. They have been postponed, and perhaps if Ashraf Ghani shows some sort of flexibility by only having people who actually mean business when they are on negotiating table, so Afghan Taliban, they would be open for this intra-Afghan dialogue, because even in the past they have not rejected such a possibility. They were of the view that first we will settle our issues with the Americans, and once they are settled, then we will go for an intra-Afghan dialogue. But certainly they would not like to give any sort of endorsement to this regime in Kabul, and they insisted even on this occasion that these people who are nominated by the Kabul regime, Afghan Taliban would meet them in their personal capacity, not in their official capacity. So there's a number of technicalities involved. I think Afghan Taliban have a point with regards to the composition of the delegation by Kabul. It should include only those people who seriously believe in the idea of peaceful settlement of Afghan issue.
I have one quick point. I personally think that, you know, for instance, the Americans never believed in engaging with Taliban. But ultimately, you know, the Taliban had to talk to their... And this is also a very wrong concept that if you think that, you know, anyone who has a view at one time or has had a strong view should not be engaged, because the whole object of bringing peace to Afghanistan is to reconcile all elements and try to sort of find a solution which is acceptable to a very large majority of the people. So I think you cannot give too much of credit to the Taliban. They have also a lot of negative points about them. So I have a feeling that the more inclusive the dialogue would be, the better it is for the future of Afghanistan.
And Dr. Khurram, concluding remarks, in next 4-5 months, 5-6 months, do you see that inclusive element coming in Afghanistan, and perhaps then they can move for the next perhaps general elections and the next government in Kabul?
Well, Zalmay Khalilzad is under tremendous pressure to deliver a breakthrough before the next presidential elections in Afghanistan, which are now scheduled to be held in July. So I think before that, there would be some sort of a breakthrough in the talks on Afghanistan.
Interesting. Let's see and hope for the best, hope for peace in Afghanistan. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Lieutenant General Talat Masood, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time. Dr. Khurram Iqbal, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. That's all from today's show. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.